Misa here with a story that's very close and personal to me. It was around 4 in the morning. I woke up. Sweat was on my forehead. And I felt like I couldn't move. My whole body was sluggish. I remember just looking around the hotel room that I was living in, waiting for my husband. I had no idea where he was. I looked around just my eyes and not my body. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I was horrified. I let out a yell, "Baby!" And I still couldn't move. I could barely move my neck, is what I realized. I began to worry, how can I move? And during this time, my body had entered this weird stage of my nerves desperately trying to send signals, it felt like. This weird, shocking feeling would go through my body, and it was so confusing. "Baby!" I let out another yell, but he wasn't listening. Until finally I began to manically yell. I didn't want to yell like this, but I had to. I began to scream and shout. I felt like I was about to piss myself, and I couldn't control my bladder. I was so scared. Everything became so confusing. I could feel as my eyes widened, and I was horrified. I definitely was urinating myself. It felt so uncomfortable. The bed became warm, but I started to become cold. I closed my eyes and started to fall asleep. I thought to myself, this is it. This is how I die, being ignored. Why is this some kind of feeling that feels like it's so typical? I'm not gonna die though, I'm immortal. How is this gonna happen? I don't understand. I'm immortal. Why am I dying? Everything became black, and I had essentially fallen asleep. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I was in the hospital. I looked around, and I was a little bit more movable, but I couldn't get my legs to work. I had this weird faint memory like I was reliving my dream that I had dreamt. Someone snickering and laughing that I wouldn't be able to move or walk because I was a fat whore. I was so perplexed. I sat here and became fixated on this conversation. Several of these criminals were laughing at me and treating me as if I was utter trash. A nurse had entered the room, but I knew this nurse. It was a transgender. And this transgender nurse in particular always knew that I'd bring up this story. And it always said that if I brought it up to the public would see it as abuse towards transgenders because you don't support us or our notions of survival. I remember feeling a tear rolled on my face as this thing had entered into my room. And the reason was I was a supporter, always, of laboratory-grown body parts rather than organ-harvested body parts. You see, the truth about reality about the brainwashed world. The brainwashed world believes we're not technologically advanced. And when you look back to Egypt, you can see organ-harvested body parts that were stolen by several criminals. And then when you turn back to individuals to whom studied medical science, we supported always a lifestyle of evolution in growing body parts. But criminals were always highly abusive, and they didn't want you taking anything that was theirs, but they wanted you to be okay with you sitting back as they took everything that was yours, including your body and name. And so for me as a person, I was utterly repulsed when I had finally found my husband again. I had wheelchaired myself from the hospital all the way back to the hotel. They had offered me a taxi ride, but I told them I was okay. I didn't want to deal with even another minute of sitting here and seeing some vile piece of shit walking up to me and talking to me like this. Once in the hotel room, I remember I had waited about 5 to 10 minutes before I decided I'd roll my wheelchair out. And when I rolled my wheelchair out, I found my husband surrounded by the same prostitutes to whom I had gotten in a fight with several weeks before. Time was becoming sort of a blur to me, and I knew that medical science works fast, but that these abusers convinced the world it takes years and years for medical science to work, and it wasn't true. And so when I had saw this psychology, this is where I as a person had really fucking hated all of these abusers, because these abusers had sat here and tried to convince me and others that, quite frankly, we were abusers because we believed in growing new limbs for amputee victims. And I had become an amputee victim after I had essentially taken an axe to an organ harvester's face. When I had done this, the organ harvester was dead, but the two people who had come up behind me was this blonde woman here and this black-haired woman there. These two individuals are what are considered fused twins, meaning they were born at the same time in the same womb, and when they were born, their limbs were broken and fused that way, and they were fused to each other. What everyone had to say was that they were, as individuals, supposed to be an abortion, and the way that they got in separated bodies was actually from this organ harvester stealing my body parts. He had come up to me and began hurting me and stole my body parts, and then had demented my husband and I into believing that we willingly gave them these body parts. The truth was not that at all, and when we went back to the studies of it, it began to feel like that through a blur of things. When they were younger, they had stolen my body parts as well, and prior to this, they had stolen body parts from several little girls, so that they had separated bodies, but they had this depressing story that they'd bring along with them the whole time. And when we had met them, they weren't fused together. I rolled up with my wheelchair to my husband and I said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "What do you want?" And I said, "What are you doing here? Why are you acting like this? Why are you being so cruel?" He snapped back again. "What do you want?" And I said, "What are you doing? Get away from me, you stupid fat fucking bitch." I looked around with fear. What are you talking about? It was horrific. All I could sit here and think was, where is my husband? And what has happened to me in all of this? He's coming into the hotel and he's having sex with me while I'm sleeping. He's kissed me and touched me and been in love with me for the last however long. But where is my husband and what is he doing? I sat here and I said, I don't. And before I could even get words out, he walked away from me. And I was quite perplexed. It was so horrific. And when I had turned back to my husband and all of this, I saw him essentially being yelled at by two known plastic surgeons who frequented at the hotels and we didn't know why. They went by Anthony Yoon and Lisa Kaselev. These two individuals were the people to whom I performed malpractice surgery on the two deformed individuals to whom were males that were born with fused bodies and broken bones. And what we had to learn, the reason was that they were fused like that, was that the woman who was pregnant with them, which was turning out to be something of a perplexing story, had essentially begged for men to rape and beat her. And in fact, she began to scream and kick and try to kill someone if she wasn't being raped and beaten. And this was actually the psychology of the women who had given birth to these two demented freaks. And when we sat here and saw this, it was just a weird situation. But I had just been injured and I went to the hospital and I was stuck in a wheelchair. I turned back to my husband and all of this and what was happening with him, but he's being yelled at by these plastic surgeons. "You don't care about her. Get the fuck away from her. Just stop with your fucking bullshit," the blonde-haired Lisa Kaselev had to say with a throw of a cigarette and her thong peeking out of her shorts. I remember thinking to myself, that thing is disgusting looking. And the moment I had seen it stomp around like this with this weird odor of what I had to presume was drugs and fecal matter, I was horrified. I watched as my husband said, okay, what's the big deal? Just knock it off, okay? No need to make a big deal out here. Just 5 minutes of drama for what? I mean, just calm yourself down. and my husband immediately had tried calming them down out in the public because he was worried about me being dragged into their drama. I realized very quickly my husband was in espionage. My husband had turned back to me and said, "Don't even fucking look at me," in this horrible cold tone. I went back to my room, feeling horrible. I was crying and feeling nihilistic, and it felt like I was contemplating suicide while going back. I sat there and I thought to myself, what in the hell is my life even worth living without you? It was when I got back to my room that a large, fat, blonde boy had come out of the room next to mine and ripped me out of my wheelchair. When it had done this, I had fallen to the ground and I felt my spine pop. I already wasn't able to move my legs, but now what has happened, I thought. And immediately my husband came running around the corner. I cried and looked at him. I said, "Well, here's the 5 minutes of drama." And the minute the boy had gotten near me, he had ripped the wheelchair from my hands and put the wheelchair in his room. My husband yanked the wheelchair from him and said, "You're not taking her fucking wheelchair. That's not fair of you." The blonde-haired boy said, "Yeah, well, I don't care about what's fucking fair. I just want some meth and hose. What the fuck you want, you little bitch?" And immediately when it had acted this way, my husband had ducked it so hard in the face, it had to get reconstruction surgery. And when it got reconstruction surgery, what everyone had to notice was that it was such an itchy feeling because it was malpractice surgery. Later on, this very blonde narcissist was then put in prison. With that being said, my husband had to wheel me away, and when he wheeled me away, he realized he couldn't leave my side, and that espionage would be an unhealthy choice in all of this. It was a horrible feeling, a very horrific feeling. My husband during all of this had taken care of me though, and if it weren't for him, there wouldn't be someone else taking care of me. I felt like I had just won the lottery, and the lottery was my life, and my husband was a cherry on top to winning everything. My everything, him. He shoved the obtuse, annoying, ugly, fat man into the room, and when this had happened, you could see Lisa Castleth and Anthony Yoon come around the corner. My husband pointed and says, "You don't say shit, get the fuck out of here." When this had happened, they turned around and said, "Well, oopsie doopsie," and walked away. It was a disgusting feeling, and everyone that saw them always just thought they were fucking disgusting. All the way from the way they sounded and the way they behaved. Everything about them, their looks and everything. It was a disgusting moment. My husband shoved the fat one into the room, and we could hear it sobbing on the floor next to us while my husband left our door wide open. My wheelchair was reclaimed by him, and thankfully I was in it and holding it tightly with this feeling that no one's going to take this from me. My husband was on the phone calling for a cab, and when he had done that, he had my belongings already packed up, and as well his. It was 2 suitcases, mine and his. Once he had gotten the 2 suitcases ready, he waited patiently for the cab. We saw the 2 surgeons come back our way again, asking for cigarettes and picking out the plaque in their teeth. We told them to leave now or we'll call the police. I said, "You don't need to get fucking heavy with it, mate." And they said this in such a weird fake British accent, making fun of us as people. They wandered off, and you could tell that both of them were strung out on dope. The cab had whirled in shortly after they had left, and he put me into the cab and the wheelchair in the back.